Number 5 on this list is El Chupacabra. You guys should know who El Chupacabra is by this point, considering we've talked about this creature tons on this channel before. Basically, it is a legendary creature in the Central Americas that's said to drink the blood of livestock. Although this creature seems like it's probably fake, it might be real, just not exactly how we might expect it to be. Carolyn Beccia says, "We are taught from an early age, don't approach scary looking dogs." And while no one can get a clear picture of Bigfoot, the Kraken, or the Loch Ness Monster, there is one monster that is oddly not camera shy: the legendary El Chupacabra. The Chupacabra was first sighted in Puerto Rico in the 70s. A wave of sightings followed in the late 1990s. During this time, livestock throughout Puerto Rico was found drained of blood. These Chupacabra, or goat sucker, attacks caused panic with local residents who claimed a vampire was feeding on their livestock. Although descriptions have varied, most describe a hairless, alien-like monster with spikes going down its back and glowing red eyes. It sounds dubious, but how could so many people be taking pictures of the same ugly dog-like creature? The answer may be one found in science. One plausible theory is that these creatures are coyotes suffering from sarcoptic mange, an inflammatory skin condition caused by the itch-inducing parasite mite scabies. Wolves, dogs, and coyotes infected with scabies will have extreme hair loss, skin shriveling, and constricted blood vessels that can lead to life-threatening fatigue. And while usually a coyote or wolf will have no problems hunting prey, once infected by sarcoptic mange, coyotes may choose to hunt more available meals such as livestock. So it's actually possible that this creature is real, it's just not what we thought at all. I know that this takes away from some of the mystery and lore around it, but ultimately this would make a lot of sense. When you think about it, what's more likely? A space alien comes crashing to Earth and starts sucking the blood of our livestock, or some coyotes get a disease and start doing it instead? I tend to side with the coyotes. Either way though, that doesn't make these coyotes nice or friendly or approachable. Still treat them like you would a chupacabra, with caution. Number 4 on this list is the Stemphalian Birds. We gotta go all the way back to ancient Greece for this one. Caroline Beccia says, one of Hercules' labors was to kill the Stemphalian birds, man-eating birds who had the peculiar habit of throwing dung. The Greeks were not the only ones who liked to scare their youngsters with killer bird tales. The Maori tribe of New Zealand told similar legends of the Pokie or Haikoi, a giant black and white bird that swooped down from the sky to pick off small children. Scientists today know that these thunderbirds existed. Called Haast's eagle, the bird stood over 6 feet tall and had a wingspan of over 8 feet. The Haast eagle would sit atop trees and then ambush its prey by swooping down at 60-mile-per-hour speeds. Then it would disembowel its meal with sharp talons before the poor slob could even worry about dung throwing. Hercules would never have survived these hellbirds, but you can sleep well tonight. The Haast's eagle went extinct around the 15th century. Anything that could annihilate Hercules would definitely be a no-go for me, guys. That dude was literally a demigod, and if these guys could have beaten him, then we wouldn't have stood a chance. Lucky for us, they are extinct now, but for the people back then, they would have had their hands full with these creatures. If, of course, they still had hands and the beast hadn't ripped them off yet. Number 3 on this list is the Kraken. We have one of the most famous folklore creatures here, guys, that, as we know now, turned out to be real. The Kraken was especially big in Norse culture. All of those people up there in the Nordic regions feared this wicked beast, as it was said to be able to pull down entire ships with hundreds of men on board. Instances where exactly that happened did actually transpire. Ships with tons of people on them that were literally made for battle would be out on the water, and then boom, Kraken attack and they're toasted. Except it wasn't really the Kraken now, was it? The Kraken looks very similar to an actual animal that we have in our world that is also super deadly and really strong. The giant squid. Giant squids, in case you couldn't tell from the name, are giant. They're pretty big. They are so big actually, they would have had the capability to take down an old ship like this. In fact, we've even seen these beasts do some serious damage to submarines, and they're made of metal. They easily could have sunk a wooden boat from hundreds or thousands of years ago. And if you were a sailor on said wooden boat and you saw this massive creature with several tentacles sucking you to the bottom of the ocean, then you would probably exaggerate what happened as well too. It's very easy to see how the legend of the Kraken got started and started to snowball as more encounters with the giant squid happened. I'm glad that the Kraken isn't technically real, because the giant squid is already bad enough. Number 2 on this list is the Charybdis. What was initially thought to be a folkloric creature may have been real, but not exactly in the way that we might think. Caroline Betchius says, "Nothing is more frightening than being sucked underwater by a whirlpool that feeds on human flesh 3 times a day." The Charybdis first appeared in Homer's Odyssey. During this epic tale, Odysseus must sail between the 6-headed sea monster Scylla and the flesh-eating whirlpool Charybdis. These 2 dueling sea monsters attacked in intervals, much like a whirlpool's regular intervals of tidal activity. It sounds terrifying, but whirlpools that pull ships underwater really do happen. Known today as Garofalo, one is found in the strait between Italy's mainland and Sicily. Garofalo occurs when winds blow across the strait in opposition to the tides. This makes it technically not a whirlpool because there's no circular motion, but it does have the ability to wreak havoc on ships and pull humans into a watery grave. So this deadly creature was real, it just ended up not being a creature at all. Back in the times when these stories were written, there would have been many folklore legends about evil sea monsters that could pull brave sailors into the sea. The reality of the situation is though that the ships we had back then kinda sucked, and it was a lot easier for the weather and other conditions to sink the ships. That's why there were so many legends of monsters coming from the ocean for so long. Finally, number 1 on this list is the Incubus Demon. This demon is an evil demon who is thought to sneak into your home and have sexual relations with you as you're sleeping. This creature is real in a sense. It just so happens that it's actually in our minds. During the witch hunt craze of the 16th and 17th century, people had some really messed up ideas on how human reproduction occurred. One way was for a demon to steal a man's seed and impregnate a helpless woman during her sleep. The monster that stole the precious sperm was called a succubus, and the monster that implanted the sperm was called an incubus. The incubus would sit on top of your chest while you slept, making it impossible for you to move if you woke. Sort of like being assaulted by a possessed sexomniac. But before you condemn medieval people as crazed horn dogs trying to attack innocent women, there is a scientific basis for believing in such monsters. The condition is called sleep paralysis. During sleep paralysis, you are fully awake but cannot move or cry for help. It feels like you've had a stroke, but although it's terrifying, sleep paralysis is harmless. Most sleep experts attribute it to being caught between REM, rapid eye movement, and NREM, non-rapid eye movement sleep. Either way, before sleep stages were understood, we can see how our ancestors would have thought it was a demon sitting on your chest. So literally, this demon creature that apparently attacked people was never real at all. It just felt extremely real from our minds. I've experienced sleep paralysis before, and although I didn't experience any demon thing, I can 100% see how people would have believed this back then. It could definitely have felt like that and would have got people on the lookout for this sick and twisted demon of the night.
Number 5. The Rolling Rock. Tesei Nagahi, otherwise known as the Traveling Stone or the Rolling Rock, was the result of his mother using a stone for relief. He was an enormous round boulder that would wait for members of the tribe to come by before hurling itself at them. If it saw someone in the distance, it would chase them in a relentless pursuit, not stopping until it had run them over, crushed them, and killed them. Nyanezgani knew about the Rolling Rock's tactics and used his mystical colored knives to stack the odds in his favor. As he approached the rock's lair, he planted his black knives in the ground. As he got closer, he planted his blue knives and his yellow ones in the intervals during his approach. When the Traveling Stone saw the hero, he took off after him, hoping to crush and kill him. As it rolled over the knives, slivers of itself were sheared off, with each different fragment becoming a new pigment. The stone from its bones became white rock, its flesh blue pigment, its hair black, its blood red, and yellow ochre coming from its intestines. Nyanezgani used his lightning arrows, which were a gift from the sun god, to chased the rolling rock all the way to the San Juan River, taking off pieces as he went, making the rock unrecognizable. The creature begged for mercy and promised to remain in the rivers where it would keep the mountain springs open so that the Dene could have fresh water. Nyanezgni agreed, and the stone took on the form of an otter with buffalo horns, known as the Water Monster, who was a well-loved and friendly creature from that point on. Number 4. The Evil Eyes. The B'nai Ahani were the result of their mother's unnatural practice with a cactus, which may be the scariest thing on this entire list. They were limbless, round creatures with a tapering end who stayed in the location where they were abandoned by their terrified mother. You know, because of the lack of limbs. They had depressions in their heads that looked like eyes, but they were the definition of if looks could kill, as they could shoot lightning out of them to shock and kill their prey. They used Magpie as their spy, and together the two creatures had offspring of a similar make and disposition. Nyanezgni prepared for battle with the B'nai by bringing his armor and a large bag of salt. He found the twins and their offspring and was attacked. They tried to hit him with their lightning, but the hero's armor deflected it. He threw the salt in a fire, and the resulting sparks blinded the creatures, allowing him to attack. In some versions he killed the creatures, and in others he transformed them into cacti, but he spared two of the children. He decided to make them useful to his people, and turned one into a screech owl whose job it was to warn the Dene of future events and imminent dangers. He transformed the other into a whippoorwill in order to make things more beautiful and the earth more happy. Number 3. The Kicking Monster. When Set Ahatsitali was born, his mother was so disgusted with him that she took him to a cliff where she put him in a hole which she covered with a stone. But he escaped and survived on the cliffside. He had no head, having only a long pointed end where it should have been. It had long, powerful legs and long hair that grew into the rock, anchoring him to the cliffside. He had several monstrous children of his own who would wait at the bottom of the cliff to be fed. The cliff was near an assortment of fruiting cacti, so many people would come by hoping to get something to eat. As they walked the cliffside, the creature would wait with his legs folded up until the passerby tried to pass in front of him. At that point, he would kick the traveler off the side, where they would tumble down to the bottom, where they would be ruthlessly devoured by the kicking monster's children. When Nyanezgni found him, he was prepared, and as he passed the strange creature, he was able to dodge its kick. The hero asked the creature why he was trying to kick him, and the monster insisted that it was just stretching its legs. It then tried to kick him 3 more times. There is some variation in the versions of this story that I found. In one, the hero is kicked off the cliff and loses his weapons, but is able to grab the monster by the hair and push him down the cliff while saving himself. In another, he dodges all the kicks, stabs the monster to death, cuts the anchoring hair, and sends him down the cliff where he is devoured by its hungry children, who the hero transformed into sheep, owls, turtles, or buzzards depending on the telling. Number 2. Yitzo. With a name meaning big monster, you knew this one was going to be bad. Yitzo was the most powerful and most feared of the Anai. As the son of a woman and a stone, he was covered with valuable rocks and minerals, with turquoise around his neck, white shell on his shoulder, an agate disc on his head, and scaly flint armor like knives covering most of his body. He had a basket of lightning bolts and was so large that each of his steps stretched as far as a man could walk from sunrise to noon. He had been hunting Nyanezgni and his twin brother, Tobadzisseni, since they were infants. But thankfully the twins were well hidden by their mothers, who hid the kids and told the giants that their footprints had been made by her in an effort to not be so lonely. As adults, the twins went after the giant, finding him drinking a lake dry in 4 gulps, and being so large that his body was above both the eastern and southern hills. The twins were spotted by the giant, who began to taunt them. They returned his taunts and soon made him furious. The giant threw lightning at them, but they were able to easily dodge while riding on a rainbow. They hit him with lightning of their own, which caused his armor to shatter, and the giant collapsed dead onto the ground. The twins scalped the giant and threw the head to the east, where it became the Cabezon Peak. Knowing that if his blood reached any of the other monsters he would be revived, the twins dug trenches, which explains the ridges and cliffs of volcanic rock near Cabezon Peak today. The Dene used his scales to make armor, knives, and arrowheads. Number 1. Skinwalkers. Moving away from the Dene, we have the most infamous of the Dene legends, the Skinwalker. Legend says that they are Dene medicine men and women who became corrupted by their power, and have developed the ability to shapeshift into the form of an animal. They take the form of monstrous bears, wolves, and coyotes, among other predators. They are almost impossible to kill, save for with a white ash-covered bullet. In order to become a Skinwalker, one must be inducted by a secret society, with the initiation being the committing beginning of an extremely evil deed, such as killing a sibling or other family member. Upon completion, they are granted their transformation powers and wear the skins of the animals they transform into, hence the name. Sometimes they are also described as wearing animal skulls or antlers on their heads. This is why the Dene consider it taboo to wear the pelts of predatory animals. Other powers include the ability to possess and control people. They are known to engage in acts such as grave robbing and cannibalism, just to name some of the more tame acts. This creature has transcended indigenous folklore and has managed to make its way into the mainstream lexicon, having appeared in novels by Stephen King, episodes of The X-Files, and several episodes of the television program Supernatural. Although many creatures from folklore across the world are capable of indescribable destruction, few are as disturbing or interesting as the creatures featured in the Legends of the Dene tribe. We'd like to thank abookofcreatures.com for providing much of the information and images sourced for this video. And as for you, are there any other countries or cultures whose folklore you would like to see explored? Leave a missive with your request in the comments below.
Number 5 on this list is the Elculebron. I'd never heard of this legend before, and I have to admit that it's pretty cool. This creature is native to Chile, and although it'd be pretty neat to look at from afar, it's definitely very dangerous. Scoop Whoop says Elculebron is basically an enormous hairy snake with a gigantic calf-like head. It's said that the creature resides inside of dark caves or remote forests, and it eats basically anything in its path. Legend also has it that the snake can draw wealth to anyone who's able to domesticate it, but trapping a culebron is no easy feat. You have to find one in the wild, pluck 3 of its longest hair strands without getting eaten, and then put it in a bowl of milk. From that bowl, 3 baby culebron will spring to life, and the strongest will eat the other 2 and become a full-fledged culebron. From that point forward, owners have to maintain the snakes with sacrifices of animals or close relatives and leave the blood in a secret location that only the snake knows of. A very unique legend if you ask me. A very deadly, giant snake creature that has the ability to bring you great wealth, but only if you can breed one and domesticate it. The story that I read off doesn't go into deep detail on how they actually bring you wealth, which would definitely be of interest to me. Maybe they're kind of like truffle-sniffing pigs, except instead of truffles, they can smell gold or rare gems or something like that. Probably the reason that we don't know for sure how they bring us wealth is because so few have actually been able to be domesticated. First off, finding one of these creatures would be very hard, because it means you'd need to trek through the jungles and mountains of Chile. Then, after finding one of the rarest creatures in the world, you also need to fight one of the most deadly creatures in the world and pluck 3 hair strands off of it. Then you need to fully domesticate another one of these beasts in your home after you grow it from a bowl of milk. There is a lot of room for error here, guys, and I doubt that many people have been able to complete all of the steps. Keep an eye out though for the Elculebron if you find yourself in Chile. Number 4 on this list is La Llorona. La Llorona is also known to many as the Weeping Woman. She is the ghostly apparition of a vengeful spirit who roams around by the water bemoaning the loss of her children whom she'd actually drowned herself. Scoop Whoop writes, according to a popular version of the tale, the Weeping Woman was once a beautiful maiden named Maria. She married a nobleman and gave birth to 2 sons. Her husband was a traveler and he rarely visited home. During their time apart, his feelings for her began to dull, but her husband still loved his sons and gave them all the attention that he left his wife bereft of. Once when he was in town, she caught him with a younger woman. Enraged, she took her sons to Santa Fe River and drowned them. She also was found dead on the riverbank a few days later, the cause of which remained unknown. It's said that when she reached heaven, she was denied entry until she found the souls of her sons. Thus, she wanders the earth looking to reclaim their souls. Dressed in a white gown and mourning for her sons, La Llorona takes lost and abandoned children and drowns them in hopes of recovering souls that will allow her entry into the afterlife. What an absolutely horrible woman. Clearly killing her own children really didn't teach her anything at all, because now she's out there killing other people's children. This is a really scary legend in Mexico, and it's often why parents don't let their children go to areas with water by themselves. There's also the the fear that La Llorona will be lurking somewhere around there thinking that she can use the souls of the young children instead of her own. You'd think that she would have realized by now that faking the souls of other people to get into heaven isn't gonna work, but by the sounds of it, she really doesn't sound like the brightest bulb in the bunch. Bright or not, she's still very dangerous, so be very careful whenever you're around water in Latin America. Number 3 on this list is La Ciguepa. La Ciguepa are interesting mythical creatures that are located in the Dominican Republic. They can be found in forests and around the rivers and lakes of the country. At first glance, they may look like a woman with long hair. However, upon closer inspection, one will see very unique characteristics. Their backwards facing feet. That's right guys, their feet actually face towards their own body, and this is one of the main differences between this creature and your standard human. Many people haven't paid close enough attention to this detail, and because of that have been tricked into thinking that this is an actual woman. A fatal mistake if one of these things decides that you'd make for some good prey. The typical target of this creature are men that find themselves exploring the forest. These creatures are said to be incredibly smart and can often outwit the people that they run into. Also, rather surprisingly, their backwards feet make them run very fast, so even if you do catch on to this creature's intentions, running away would be very hard to do. The earliest mention of this creature was back in 1866, and since then there have been many stories written about these creatures. Those lucky enough to have an interaction and then make it out alive have documented their findings and tried to warn others from wandering into the forests unarmed. Sadly, these warnings aren't always heeded, and many men have disappeared over the years, never to be heard of again. Trekking through the lush forests of the Dominican Republic is already dangerous as is and requires lots of planning. Just don't forget to also plan for the La Ciguepa if you do find yourself in this country. Number 2 on this list is the Yakumama. Ever seen the movie Anaconda? 1997 movie with J-Lo and Owen Wilson, all about a super massive snake that starts hunting this filmmaker? Well, I wouldn't be shocked if that snake was based off of the legend of the Yakumama. Cryptid Wiki says the Yakumama is a large snake up to 60 meters in length that is said to inhabit the Amazon River basin. Local shamans say that the Yakumama travels to an area called the Boiling River. In the local legends, the Yakumama is said to be the mother of all marine life. It has the ability to suck up any living thing that passed within 100 paces. The locals would blow on a conch horn before entering the river, believing after hearing the noise, the serpent would reveal itself if it was in the area. I can't describe to you guys how massive 60 meters in length would actually be. Titanoboa was an ancient creature that actually existed in the Amazon. It was a massive snake, the biggest the world has ever seen, that ruled over these parts and could swallow crocodiles whole. That creature at its max would grow up to 50 feet in length or 15 meters. So basically, Yakumama is 4 times the size of the biggest and deadliest snake that's ever lived. This thing would be able to annihilate hundreds of humans at once. Even if the locals did blow on their conch and the snake did reveal itself, then there would literally be nothing that they could do. It would just eat them all, and that would be that. Snakes are super cool, but not when they're 60 meters long and looking to devour me. Number 1 on this list is the Putin. Putin are very dangerous and deadly beasts and should not be underestimated under any circumstances. Cryptid Wiki says, the Putin, a creature from the Mapuche mythology and Chilote mythology pertaining to southern Chile, was a feared shapeshifter which could instantly change into anything. It's often been described as a gigantic flying snake that produced strange whistling sounds, while its gaze could paralyze an intended victim and permit it to suck its blood. It's often been reported as sucking blood from sheep. The creature can be eliminated by a maki. So maki, in case you aren't familiar, are medicine women, and they're believed to be the only people capable of defeating this beast. Meaning that you could be the strongest warrior in the world, you could have taken down beasts and enemies in the hundreds before, but you would still fall to the Putin if you weren't a maki. It's extremely hard to kill something if you can't even look at it, and that's what this is like. Similar to Medusa in the way that it can paralyze you if you look at it, fighting this beast is near impossible. Aside from its ability to paralyze people, it's also extremely fast, extremely strong, it can fly, and it can also shapeshift into other dangerous creatures. Pray that you never run into this creature, because it will assuredly be the last thing that you ever do.
In at number 5 we have Ong Ba Bi. The Ong Ba Bi is considered to be the Vietnamese version of the Boogeyman and is said to have originated in the 17th century. The story of the Boogeyman is told throughout the world in many different ways, but in Vietnam it's the Ong Ba Bi that brings fear to children, and parents use it to scare their children into behaving. Many parents in Vietnam threaten their children saying things like "stop crying" or "Ong Ba Bi will come and take you," or "eat your broccoli" or "I'll call Ong Ba Bi." The Boogeyman in general doesn't have any specific appearance, and conceptions vary drastically by household and culture. But the Ong Ba Bi is described as an old, rugged man carrying 3 sacks, has 12 eyes, and he likes to kidnap naughty children using and putting them into his sack. When looking at the personality traits of the Boogeyman, they are divided into 3 categories. One being the kind that punishes misbehaved children, the kind that are more prone to violence, and the kind that protect the innocent. They all relate in the same way, being that they all exist to teach young children lessons. And that's why the Boogeyman is directly related to Ong Ba Bi, because they are both there to frighten children with punishment and to steal them at night and sometimes even eat them. The Ong Ba Bi only ever comes at night and only kidnaps the children who are misbehaving and not listening to their parents. This so-called mythical creature is said to be invented by parents in order to scare children when they are disobedient and scaring them into having good behavior. Another account says that it was invented based on events happening in the 17th century when starvation ran rapid through Vietnam, and it drove many people into kidnapping children to sell for food, and the Ong Ba Bi is based on those events. Whichever the case, many know these tales regardless of where you're from, and the story of Ong Ba Bi is told by parents to children to this day and is a very fearsome figure to children in Vietnam. Coming in at number 4 we have Marda. Children living in areas close to the river are warned about Marda, which are vengeful spirits who lurk in bodies of water. They're believed to be the souls of drowned victims that tend to have a childlike appearance, and they manifest as bloated corpses with weeds for hair. It's believed these souls died in torment and they cannot find peace and can only be reincarnated if there is another to take their place. The Marda roam in lakes and rivers waiting to drag down unsuspecting swimmers, but it's believed that this is most likely made up to warn children to not go swimming unsupervised, because many fatal water-related accidents are very common in Vietnam. Many happenings and stories of the Marda come from the infamous Tu Lich, otherwise known as the Cursed River. Back in September 2001, while working to take out some of the excessive mud and trash build-up in the river, a construction team uncovered several wooden piles arranged in a strange formation, including ceramic relics, metal utensils, and even bones from human skeletons. The odd occurrence even made headlines on many different newspapers at the time, but had eventually died down. Several years later, in 2007, the happenings came up again when Mr. Nguyen Hung Quang, the leader of the construction team, recounting many misfortunes that had happened to him and others who were related to the project since 2001. Some of the things that happened to these men included experiencing nightmares in which they were haunted by ghosts, feelings of being drowned, as well as health issues such as epileptic seizures and other accidents happening to the men's families. Mr. Nunjian even invited a monk to perform a ritual to lift the curse on the river, but the attempt was unsuccessful, and the monk died shortly after visiting. In at number 3 we have Koinahap Trung. The Koinahap Trung tend to possess the bodies of the recently deceased. Legend has it that when someone passes away and is prepared for burial, it is extremely important to not let a black cat, which is a symbol of bad luck, leap over the coffin. If that does happen, then the body of the deceased will be infested by evil spirits, which then turns into Koinahap Trung and chases the living. Other stories claim Koinahap Trung are spirits of the dead who prey on the frail, dying people, seeking to consume their souls and steal their bodies so they can indulge in earthly pleasures. Older victims are much easier to manipulate and possess, and they are close enough to death even when they do end up passing away. The Koinahap Trung stays in their bodies and can live on in that body, enjoy their life on earth. When it inhabits the elderly, they seem to appear reinvigorated but also start to act strangely. Some of the weird things these revived humans do are they ask for lots of food, and very specific foods to feed on, like raw blood and even living animals. These odd behaviors are mistaken for signs of recovery, which why Koinahap Trung can live among the living normally for a few days or even weeks before people start noticing the strange behavior. Obviously this person is already dead and their body is taken over and possessed by this demon, and the only way for the Koinahap Trung to exit the body is by an exorcism, and then once the evil spirit is expelled, the body will immediately show signs of decay, as if it's been dead for days. Some believe that this legend is exaggerated accounts of the incidents where someone is wrongfully declared dead and wakes up suddenly during their funeral, which is terrifying. In at number 2, Marley. Marley is said to be one of the most terrifying creatures in the Vietnamese folklore. By daytime they are said to walk among us disguised as women, usually looking young, very beautiful, and often appearing tired. I'm always tired. At night, though, it's said that their heads detach from their bodies. They are seen dragging bloody organs alongside them and float around to feast on flesh, organs, and other rancid items. It is also believed that someone whose excrement is consumed by a Marley is cursed with eternal hunger and will eventually die of starvation no matter how much they eat. When sunrise comes, they must return to their human body again, otherwise they'll be burned to death by the sunlight. So the easiest way to vanquish a Marley is to hide their desired body so that she can't reattach her head. Apparently, the Marley story originated from when a woman, believed to be cursed, engaged in various sins and fraudulent activities during her previous life. Then after she died, her sins caused her to be reborn as a horrific demon who lives off dead animals, their organs, excrement, and garbage. There have been many different sightings throughout the 21st century, including strange red lights floating up and down a field in 2016, and then again in 2016 villagers saw strange green and red lights rising up and down in the distance, and people thought it was the Marley due to her glowing appearance when she floats through the night. There have also been videos and pictures seen all over social media believing to be the Marley, showing glowing figures hovering around the night sky and eyewitnesses capturing these sightings, and people have no explanation for them. Similar creatures as the Marley can be seen in the folklore of many other Southeast Asian countries including Malaysia, Thailand, and Cambodia, where they are known as the other names such as Arp, Krasu, or Penangel, but they all relate back to Marley. And finally, in at number 1 we have Than Trung. The Than Trung are evil spirits who torture the souls of the dead. These spirits usually appear as either massive black birds with blood-red beaks, or they have massive bird-shaped heads with human-like bodies and glowing red eyes. They also have large wings which help them fly, and they stay close to cemeteries and sit on mountain peaks to have a better view to seek out the next prey, and are able to see who is being buried at each cemetery. They often appear after someone passes away and is newly buried, and they show up next to the new grave. It is said that they torture the newly dead people's souls for information about their living relatives, then the Than Trung hunts down their relatives and reap the souls of those living people, leading to several family members dying within a short period of one another. Apparently, the Than Trung must get to the newly buried person within 49 days or they cannot summon their soul. There is even a horror game that came out called The Death Than Trung, which is based off the folklore and was created and developed by Dong Si and some member of Team Dut in 2021. The game is a first-person psychological horror adventure game that is highly inspired by the demon folklore. The game revolves around the story of a young man who was stuck in an endless nightmare at his inn, and the black and red are the main color tones in the game. It takes place in the city of Hanoi in 2021 and heavily involves the Than Trung and their reign of terror.